The forest was quiet, only the sound of leaves moving with the wind. Caleb walked slowly through the trees, eyes sharp, boots soft on the ground. He had been living alone on this planet for almost 2 years. It was wild and untamed, but it was. Home now, he hunted, fished, and set traps to survive. Today. He was checking one of his older traps, something he hadn't used in weeks. As he got closer, he noticed something strange. The trap rope was shaking slightly. It wasn't supposed to move like that unless something big was inside. Maybe a forest boar, or even a wild crawler. He held his knife tight and stepped forward, ready for anything. But when he pushed the branches aside and looked at the trap, he froze. Inside the hanging net was not a beast, not a crawler. It was a girl, an alien girl. She was curled up tightly, arms around her legs. Her skin was light blue, almost glowing, and thin lines shimmered across her arms. She wore a torn cloth. Barely enough to cover her body, her hair was silver, long, and messy, like it hadn't been washed in weeks. She looked weak, dirty, and terrified. Caleb's mouth opened, but no words came out. The girl looked at him with wide, glowing eyes. She didn't speak, but her face showed only one thing: fear. Real, deep fear. "I'm not going to hurt you," Caleb said softly, putting his knife away. He moved slowly toward the rope to lower the trap. The girl didn't answer, only shook her head and whispered something he couldn't hear. When the net hit the ground, she didn't move. She just sat there, staring at him like he was a monster. Caleb took off his backpack and pulled out his water bottle. He placed it on the ground near her and stepped back. She looked at the bottle, then at him, very slowly. She reached out, grabbed it, and drank fast. Like she hadn't had water in days. "Who are you?" Caleb asked gently. She didn't answer, just hugged her knees tighter. He noticed bruises on her arms and a burn mark on her ankle. Something terrible had happened to her. "I'm Caleb," he said, pointing to his chest. "You?" The girl looked at him, then down at the dirt. After a long pause, she whispered, "Shali." "Shali," Caleb repeated, nodding. "That's a nice name." She looked away, breathing heavily, her body shaking. Caleb knew she needed help, food, warmth, maybe even medicine. He had no idea where she came from or why she was in this forest, but he couldn't just leave her here. "I have a fire not far from here," he said softly. "Safe. Warm food." She didn't respond, but when he stood and took a step, she followed with her eyes. He waited, then slowly turned and began walking toward his camp. After a few seconds, he heard her footsteps behind him, weak and unsure. At camp, Caleb lit the fire again and placed a blanket on the ground. Shali sat down, far from him, eyes never leaving his hands. He roasted some root vegetables and placed them near her. She didn't touch them at first. Instead, she asked, in a broken voice, "You? No? Eat me." Caleb's heart sank. "No," he said firmly. "Never." She stared at him like she didn't believe him. "Others. Try before," she whispered. Her voice cracked as she said it, and her body trembled. Caleb felt a chill deeper than the wind. What had she gone through? Why was she so afraid? What kind of people had done this to her? He didn't ask more questions. He just gave her his coat, laid it gently beside her. She stared at it for a long moment, then slowly pulled it over her shoulders. The fire cracked, sending warm light across their faces. Shali watched the flames like she had never seen fire before. Then she spoke again, almost in a whisper. "You are not like others." "No," Caleb said quietly. "I'm not." She looked into the fire, eyes glowing softly. Caleb sat on the other side, not too close, just close enough. The forest around them was dark. But in that small circle of firelight, something fragile had begun. Not trust, not yet, but maybe the beginning of it, and somewhere deep inside. Caleb knew this was no ordinary meeting, and this alien girl in his trap might change everything. The fire had died down to glowing embers. Caleb lay on his side, his eyes heavy with sleep, but he wasn't sleeping, not really. He kept glancing toward the girl curled up near the edge of the camp. Shali sat with her knees to her chest, eyes wide open. She hadn't blinked in minutes. She hadn't moved since she wrapped herself in his coat, Only her glowing eyes showed she was still awake. The night was cold. The stars above twinkled in silence. A wild animal howled far in the distance, but Shali didn't flinch. She was used to the dark, used to fear. Caleb sat up slowly, careful not to scare her. "You should sleep," he said softly. "We're safe here." She didn't look at him. "No sleep," she whispered. "They come when I sleep. Who comes?" he asked, though he already feared the answer. "Men," she said, voice shaking. "They laugh. They bite. They touch." Caleb felt a cold anger rise inside him. He wanted to ask more, but something told him to stop. She wasn't ready, and maybe he wasn't ready to hear it. "I'll stay awake," he said. "You can rest." She looked at him for a long time, her eyes scanning his face, searching for lies. She found none still. She didn't lie down. Instead, she moved closer to the fire, her hands stretched out to feel the heat. Caleb noticed her fingers thin, scarred, and shaking. This girl had lived through something worse than any monster in the forest. He pulled out his old thermos and poured some warm tea. She sniffed it before taking a sip. Then her body relaxed. "Just a little. Good?" he asked. She nodded slowly, then said, "Sweet. Not drug, no drugs," he promised. "Only herbs and honey." She looked into the cup like it was magic. Then she asked, "Why you help me?" Caleb didn't answer right away. He poked the fire, thinking. Then he said, "Because you needed help, others see me. They run," she whispered, "or they take me." Caleb met her eyes. "I'm not like them." She stared at him again. Quiet. Then she spoke a word in her own language, one he didn't understand. It sounded like Novel Cora. "What's that mean?" he asked. She hesitated, then answered, "Safe one." Caleb didn't know what to say. He only nodded. It was the first word she'd used that sounded like hope. Hours passed, and still, she wouldn't close her eyes. She moved like a ghost, walking softly around the camp, always watching, always listening. At one point, she froze and crouched. Caleb jumped up, alert. "What is it?" he asked. She pointed toward the tree's sound. Metal. Footstep. Caleb grabbed his old rifle and stepped into the shadows. Nothing, just whined through the leaves. But Shali didn't relax until much later, finally, when the moon was high. Her body gave in. She sat beside the fire and leaned against a tree. Her eyes still open but heavy. Caleb took a blanket and gently covered her legs. She didn't resist. Instead, she whispered, "If I scream." "Don't let them take me, you're safe," Caleb said. "I promise." A long silence followed. Then, finally, her eyes closed. Not deep sleep, but enough. Her body relaxed, her breath slowed. She was dreaming, and Caleb feared what she might see. He sat near her, eyes on the dark, rifle ready. The firelight flickered across her face, and in that light, she didn't look like an alien. She looked like someone who just wanted to feel human, someone who had been broken but hadn't given up. That night, Caleb didn't sleep. He stayed by her side, not because she needed him, but because she deserved someone to stay. Morning sunlight slipped through the tall trees. Soft rays touched Shali's face. Warming her cold skin, she stirred slightly, then opened her eyes, blinking in the light. For a moment, she looked peaceful, like someone waking from a long dream. But when she saw Caleb sitting nearby, her body stiffened again. Until she remembered he hadn't hurt her, not even once. Caleb handed her a piece of cooked root and a small fruit. He didn't say a word, just set it on a flat rock between. Then he backed away and sat near the fire. Quietly sharpening his old knife, Shali looked at the food. Then at him, her fingers twitched, unsure, but finally she reached out and took a bite. Slowly, carefully, like she still expected something bad to happen. "It's called Zella." "Root," Caleb said after a moment. "Tastes awful, but keeps you warm," she didn't reply. But she didn't spit it out either. That was a start. Later that day, Caleb began repairing one of his old traps. He needed to catch more food, maybe find better tools. As he worked, he noticed Shali watching him from behind a tree. Not hiding, just curious. He held up a broken spring and made a small motion. She hesitated, then slowly walked closer. Her steps were light, silent, like she had been trained to move without sound. When she reached him, she crouched beside the trap and studied it. Then, without a word, she adjusted the pressure hook and twisted the coil. The trap clicked into place. Perfect. Caleb blinked, impressed. You know traps? She nodded. Slaver ships. Use same trick. Different shape, he frowned, but said nothing. Instead, he handed her the next broken piece. They worked together without talking, fixing 2 more traps before the sun began to fall again. At night, Caleb made a small stew. He gave Shali her own bowl and a wooden spoon. She sat near him, now not close, but not across the fire either, halfway, and that small change meant everything. After dinner, she pointed to his backpack. You? Have music? She asked, surprising him. He smiled a little and pulled out a small data chip. He slid it into a solar-powered pad and played a soft song, an old Earth lullaby with strings and quiet piano. Shali tilted her head, listening, then she whispered, I heard this before. Where? Caleb asked. In the cage, she said quietly. They play it when they sell. Caleb's stomach twisted. That beautiful song had been used as background for something dark. She looked away, as if ashamed of remembering. I'm sorry, he said softly, but she shook her head. This time, it sounds better. They sat in silence again, letting the music wash over them. It was the first time Caleb saw her close her eyes without fear, just for a few seconds, but it was real that night. She didn't sleep in the corner. She lay near the fire. The blanket wrapped tightly around her. Caleb stayed up a little longer, watching the stars through the trees. He thought about what she'd said, what she'd survived, and what it meant that she fixed his trap and asked for music. She was trying. In the morning, he awoke to the smell of roasted roots. He sat up and saw Shali crouched by the fire. Turning the food carefully, she looked at him with a serious face and said, Today. I cook, he smiled. Fair enough. She handed him a piece with a small nod. He took a bite and made a face. She raised an eyebrow. You said tastes awful. I lied, he joked. Yours tastes worse. She stared at him, confused. Then she smiled, not a big smile, just a tiny curve at the corner of her lips. But it was the first one he'd seen, and it hit him like sunlight. Later, as they packed supplies for the day, Caleb paused. He reached into his old bag and pulled out a tiny mirror. He handed it to her. She took it carefully and looked at her. Reflection for a long time. Her fingers touched her face, her hair. Then she asked, Do I still look like a thing? Caleb shook his head. No, he said firmly. You look like someone. Shali stared at the mirror, her eyes shimmering. Then she whispered, I want to look human. You don't have to, he said. But if you want, I can help. She nodded once, and just like that, a quiet bond grew stronger. Not full trust yet, but the kind of trust that starts with simple things. A shared meal, a bad joke, a song remembered, and a smile that meant she no longer saw him as the monster, but as someone who saw her. The morning began like any other. Bird creatures chirped softly in the trees. Wind moved gently through the forest leaves. Shali helped Caleb pack small tools into a satchel. They were going to check the eastern traps. She was quiet but not afraid anymore. Her footsteps matched his, her eyes alert but calm. It felt like peace. It felt like maybe, just maybe, she was healing. But peace never lasts long on a wild planet, not when your past knows how to follow. As they reached a rocky ridge, Shali suddenly stopped. Her ears twitched, her pupils shrank. She sniffed the air, then looked up. Caleb turned to ask. Didn't get the chance. A low rumble shook the trees. The birds scattered into the sky. Leaves fluttered down like green snow, and then a black ship roared overhead, its engines screaming like angry ghosts. It was sleek, claw-marked, and flew in hunting patterns. Shali dropped to the ground and covered her head. No. She whispered, No, 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 not again. Caleb grabbed her arm gently. You know that ship? She nodded fast, panic rising in her voice. They come for me. Blood scent, skin trail, neural tags, slavers. Caleb asked, already guessing. She nodded again. They think I'm still theirs, she hissed. They never stop hunting. The ship passed overhead but circled again.
Ow.
Low and slow, scanning the forest. Caleb pulled her into a crevice, and the ridge, covering them with moss and branches, they stayed still, not even breathing too loud. The ship hovered, then slowly drifted westward, disappearing behind the mountain. Only then did Shali let out a deep breath. We don't have much time, Caleb said. They'll land. And search on foot. I can't run again, she said softly. My legs won't last, and my heart. It breaks every time. Caleb placed a hand on her shoulder. Then we don't run, I said. We fight smart, back at the camp. Shali helped Caleb gather every tool, trap, and weapon. They packed fast, quiet, and focused. She showed him how her people avoided scanners. Covering scent trails with mud and broken plant oils, she even burned the old coat he gave her hit. Carried too much of her scent? Who were these people? Caleb finally asked. The ones after you? Shali paused, hands trembling. I was born to a ruling family. Not noble, but rare. My kind Jureen were hunted for our blood. Some wanted us for power, others for pleasure. I was taken young, put in chains, sold too many. Her voice broke, but she kept going. I escaped during a moonfire raid. But they want me back, not because they care, but because I'm theirs by price. You're not a thing, Caleb growled. You're a person. She looked at him, eyes wide and wet. No one ever said that to me, she whispered, a soft beeping came from the edge of the camp, motion sensor trap. Someone was near. Caleb crouched behind a log and peered through the brush. A tall armored figure stepped into the clearing, dark armor, glowing helmet, and a long pulse spear on his back. He scanned the area slowly, methodically, like a hunter that had done this many times before. Shali didn't scream, didn't cry. She pulled Caleb back and whispered, They always send scouts first if he reports me alive. More will come. Then we stop him here, Caleb said, loading his bolt launcher. No, she said, eyes glowing softly. Let me. Before he could stop her. Shh. Shali stepped out of the brush. She whispered a strange word, and her form shimmered. Suddenly, her body turned invisible. Only a faint ripple in the air remained. Caleb gasped. Camouflage. Biophase trick, she whispered. Part of my bloodline. She moved through the clearing like a ghost. The scout turned slightly, as if sensing something. But too late, Shali struck, using a sharpened stone to slice the scanner belt. From his waist, she disabled the cum chip and dropped a sleep dart into his neck. The armored man stumbled and fell silently into the dirt. Caleb ran to her side. That was risky, he said. She smiled, her hands shaking, but proud. I told you I don't want to run again. Together. How? They dragged the scout's body into a pit and covered it with leaves. Shali removed a glowing chip from his helmet. This was sending my location. Now, it sends a fake 1 mile away. Caleb stared at her, impressed and concerned. You were trained. I was broken, she said simply. But you're helping me remember how to fight as the sun set and the sky turned red. Shali and Caleb sat by the fire again, weapons close. They knew more ships might come, but for now, the camp was safe, and Shali. She was no longer the girl hiding in the trap. She was the storm preparing to rise. The forest was no longer safe, not after the scout, not after the ship. Even if they'd fooled the tracker, more would come smarter, faster, crueler. Caleb didn't wait for that. We can't stay here anymore, he said, tightening his pack. I know a place forgotten even by humans. Shali didn't argue. She only nodded and followed him deeper into the wild. Her feet were sore, but she didn't complain. This time, she chose to walk, not because she had to, but because she trusted where he was taking her. They walked for hours through thick brush and hidden paths, past rivers and old fallen satellites, until finally they reached a moss-covered hill. At first, it looked like any other hill, but Caleb knelt and brushed away the mistraveling rusted metal beneath. He tapped a code into an ancient keypad. Click hiss. A hidden hatch opened, revealing a dark staircase going down. What is this place? Shali whispered, eyes wide. An old fallout bunker. Caleb replied. What? Built by the first settlers, abandoned after the colony moved inland. Even the animals avoid it. She looked uneasy. Is it haunted? He chuckled. Only by silence. They stepped inside, sealing the hatch behind them. Lights flickered on as old solar panels came to life. Dust danced in the air, but the place was dry and strong. There were beds, shelves, even a small kitchen. Caleb had discovered this place months ago, but never used it until now. Shali walked slowly through the rooms, fingers brushing across walls and old photos. She stopped in front of a faded picture of a human family. They look happy, she said softly. They never had to run. Caleb didn't reply. He just unpacked supplies later that night. They shared a small meal of dried meat and boiled roots. But something felt different in the bunker. The air wasn't just warm, it felt safe, like the world above couldn't reach them here. I've never had walls before, Shali whispered. I always slept in cages, forests, tunnels. Never somewhere still. Caleb handed her a soft towel and motioned toward a corner wash station. You can bathe here, he said. Water still runs from the old filters. Shali stared at him, surprised. Then she nodded and disappeared. Behind the curtain, moments later, he heard the water start, followed by something else. Soft laugh, small, quick, and real. She was laughing. Caleb smiled to himself. He didn't interrupt. He just sat on the floor, sharpening a tool, letting her have that moment. When she returned, her hair was damp and glowing faintly. She wore an old human shirt over her own outfit. Sleeves rolled and knotted. She looked more relaxed than ever before. You kept this place ready, she said. Did you know I'd come? Caleb shook his head. No, he said. I just hoped I'd never need to use it alone. That night, for the first time, Shali fell asleep before Caleb. She lay curled on one of the old bunks. Breathing slowly, her hands were no longer clenched. Her face didn't hold fear, just calm. Caleb sat nearby, listening to the quiet hum of the old vents. He didn't know what this was becoming now, but he knew what it wasn't. She wasn't just a stray or a guest. She was part of his world now. The next morning, she woke him, holding a small metal cube in her hand. I found this in a drawer, she said. It's a memory recorder. Your people's kind. He took it, surprised. It still works? She smiled. I fixed it while you slept. They placed the cube on the table and powered it on. A 3D image projected old settlers logging their life in the bunker, laughing, singing, celebrating something called Founders Day. Shali watched the hologram closely. This is how home looks, she said, voice filled with wonder, not chains. Shh, just. Together, Caleb nodded. We can make that, he said. Here, she looked at him. Do humans always offer home to strangers? Only the special ones, he replied. Only the ones who stop running. She didn't answer, but she took his hand gently just for a second. It was enough. Down in that bunker where time had forgotten them, 2 lives, broken by the galaxy, began to rebuild, not as prisoner and protector, but as survivors and maybe something more. Asterisk, the bunker walls were quiet, too quiet. Even the hum of old machines felt distant that morning. Caleb noticed at first the way Shali stood near the mirror, her hand trembling slightly. She wasn't cold, she wasn't scared, she was changing. Shali, Caleb asked gently. She didn't turn, her eyes were locked on her reflection. Not fear in them, something deeper, something ancient. My blood is remembering, she whispered. He stepped closer. Remembering what? She slowly reached toward the mirror. Her fingers shimmered with blue light. When she touched the glass, it cracked, not from force, but from energy. I was made. Not just to serve, not just to be sold, she said. I was born from lines. Older than I knew, she turned toward him now. Her skin glowed faintly, her pupils shifting to thin rings of silver. I carry a code. A map. Something buried in me long ago. Caleb didn't understand all of it, but he listened, because right now, she needed someone to witness her becoming. That night, the air in the bunker changed. Shali woke suddenly, eyes wide, chest heaving. The room was glowing faintly blue. Lines of alien light spread across her arms, neck, even her face like ancient circuits lighting up. I dreamed of fire, she whispered, of towers falling, of stars screaming, and of someone, like me, standing in the center. Was it a memory? Caleb asked, kneeling beside her. She shook her head slowly. No, she said. I think it was a warning. Suddenly, her body tensed. She gripped the edge of the bedlight bursting from her fingertips. Get back, she said, her voice shaking. I can't control it, something's unlocking. Caleb stepped back but didn't run. He watched as energy pulsed from her chest wave after wave. The lights flickered, then shorted out completely. A strange hum filled the air. Not mechanical. Alive. Shali let out a cry, not from pain, but release, and then everything went still. The glow faded, the air settled. She collapsed gently into Caleb's arms, exhausted. He held her in silence. Out. The room was dark again, but she was still. Breathing. In the morning, she awoke stronger. Not just physically, her gaze was sharper, her voice clearer. I know what I am now, she said. I am a voice binder. A what? Caleb asked, pouring warm tea into a tin mug. It means my blood was engineered to carry command tones, she explained. I can't just mimic sound. I can control minds. Caleb froze. Is that how you scared the drone scout away? She nodded. I didn't know what I was doing then, but now I do. She placed a hand over her heart. I was bred to be a weapon, but I refuse to be one. Then what will you be? He asked quietly. She looked at him, serious but soft. I'll be a shield, she said, for you. Caleb felt something shift in his chest, not fear, not confusion. It was awe. Later that day, they trained in the lower level of the bunker. Caleb tossed rocks while Shali focused her voice, making vibrations twist them in midair. She closed her eyes and mimicked his voice perfectly, then switched to a tone that shook the old pipes in the wall. She's not just learning, Caleb thought. She's waking up at night. As they shared a small meal, Shali asked if they come again. The hunters, the ones who tracked me all this way. What will you do? Caleb answered without thinking. I'll stand in front of you. She stared at him a moment, then whispered, what if I stood in front of you? The fire flickered between them, casting orange light on her glowing veins in that moment. Caleb saw not a lost girl, not a runaway, but a rising storm, not born to destroy, but to protect, and maybe, just maybe, to lead. The forest held its breath. Dawn light barely touched the trees when the sound came, a low hum. Then a deep rumble. The sky cracked open as the hunter ship descended, black and sharp like a blade. Caleb stood at the edge of the bunker, spear in hand, eyes steady. Behind him, the air shimmered softly. Shosli's glow returned. But stronger now, she no longer hid it. Her veins pulsed with light, not fear. And her stance was no longer that of a frightened girl, but of someone who had decided today would not be another escape. They're here, Caleb said, tightening his grip. I know, she answered, stepping beside him. I can hear their minds, their thirst. You ready? No, she said, but I've been unready my whole life from the ship's belly. Armored hunters dropped like insects, 8 of them, moving as one. Their leader stood tall, a breathing mask covering his twisted face. He raised a scanner and pointed directly at Shali. There, he growled, bring the product home. Shali stepped forward, hands raised, not in surrender, but in silence. The wind moved through her silver hair, her eyes glowing like twin stars. You used to call me Thing, she said softly. Today you'll remember my name. She tapped her wrist, and the air around them pulsed. Old machines in the forest, hidden and half-buried, sparked to life. Trap Caleb and Shali had built together. Boom. Concussive blast through to hunters back into the ship. The others scattered, confused, but still moving fast. Caleb charged the nearest one. Swinging his spear low and sharp, he was no soldier, but survival had made him brutal and quick. Shali walked slowly toward the leader. He raised a pulse rifle, but she opened her mouth first and sang. Not music, not words, a sound older than the stars. A voice binder's call. The leader froze, rifle shaking, then dropped to one knee. His helmet cracked from the inside his mind, splitting under the weight of her command. The others turned toward her, and she unleashed a second tone, this one like thunder. One dropped his weapon, hands over his ears. Another stumbled into a trap hole and vanished with a scream. Caleb slammed his boot into a dazed hunter's chest, then looked over his shoulder. "Remind me not to get on your bad side," he called. Shali smiled without turning back. "You're safe," she said. "That's all that matters." 3 hunters remained, and they ran, not from the trap, not from the human, but from her. From the girl they once branded, who now stood like a goddess, glowing and powerful, more than alien, more than weapon, free. She walked toward the ship. Inside, the systems flickered, warning tones blinking across screens. She placed her palm on the outer shell. It reacted instantly, screens shutting down, memory banks frying. "No more tracking," she whispered. "No more cages." Behind her, Caleb caught his breath. Watching the ship go dark, the last hunter limped away into the trees, and just like that, it was over. Shali turned and walked back to him. Her glow dimmed now, not gone, just resting. Like a star between flares, Caleb held out his hand. She took it, no hesitation. "You good?" he asked softly. "No," she said, smiling, "but I'm free." They stood there as the sun rose, the birds returned. And the trees swayed like they'd seen this before, a girl with light in her blood, and a human who chose not to run later. That night, back in the bunker, they sat side by side. Shali held the old necklace Caleb had given her. She turned it in her fingers, then said, "What do you call someone who chooses their own name?" Caleb thought a moment. "Someone who finally owns their story." She nodded. "Then call me Leah," she whispered. "Not Shali, not Elevany, just Leah." He repeated the name slowly. Let it settle. It felt right, outside the stars. Blinked into view, and as the fire crackled between them, the girl who once feared being eaten sat beside the man who never saw her as prey. And together, they began writing a new story, one not built on chains, but on choice, and for the first time in either of their lives there was no trap, no cage, just freedom. In the light of 2 souls learning how to burn without fear.